everybody that's here. Thank you for joining. My name's Laurel Irvine. I'm the communications manager at Turtle Island. And I am introducing our lovely ocean program director, Joanie Steinhaus, today. Joanie's been with the organization for 12 and a half years. She's located in Galveston with our Gulf of Mexico office. Which is also where a lot of our staff is. So she gets to be with our incredible staff day in and day out and work on not only tons of fossil fuel industry projects and advocating against new projects within that, but also safeguarding and conserving different sea turtles in the Gulf, and namely the Kemp's Ridley, which is endangered. So um, today we're going to be talking about nurdles. Joanie, if you have no idea what nurdles are, Joanie's going to give you the full scoop today. It is a part of our plastic pollution crisis work. And Joanie, I believe, has been working on it specifically for about 7 years, or is that the microplastic research?
That's the microplastic nurdles. About 5 years we've been involved.
About 5 years. So yeah, so there's a million ways where we can get involved and support the work that Jody's doing locally and also talk about it on a global scale. So without further ado, thank you for all the TIRN members for not only being a part of our membership, but also taking interest into this topic because it is a big one that we're fighting and we could use your help on. So Joni, go ahead.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Laurel. Welcome, everyone. I appreciate you being here tonight. So we are going to focus on nurdles and nurdle patrol. And I want to start. Laurel mentioned that we talk a lot about fossil fuel and fighting fossil fuel in the Gulf. Plastic is directly tied back to fossil fuel. Natural gas is fracking, and oil is called cracking. And so these raw materials are extracted from the earth, they're transported to facilities, and they're turned into the building blocks that become plastics. And most people are very familiar with polymers, and that's the core ingredient of plastic products. And so nurdles, what is a nurdle? A nurdle is a primary plastic. Though on the right side of your screen, those are all nurdles found on our beaches here in Galveston. They unfortunately are washed up from the Gulf, and they are very lightweight and float very easily. And so all the images on the bottom are different types of nurdles. And if you look at the third one, there's a black one. That one specifically might go to an auto manufacturer where they'll make parts for cars. So each nurdle is manufactured to send to a specific industry for them to make additional plastic products. So your mayonnaise jar, the water bottle you might drink from, they're all made from nurdles. Or there's also powders and flakes. And so those are primary plastic products, and the products that we use in our homes every day are used secondary plastic products. And you can see on the left, nurdles are made and they're transported and there's spills all along the way. And so unfortunately, again, they're very lightweight. They're transported by truck and train and on large cargo vessels across the ocean. You can see it looks like snow. And just to give you an idea of how many nurdles, a cup, a regular measuring cup, holds about 4,000 nurdles. So those are thousands and thousands of nurdles on the side of that railroad track. There have been instances where the large cargo vessels, the large crates, are dropped off accidentally, of course, but then thousands and thousands of nurdles are released into the open ocean. And you don't have to be in a coastal community. I live in Galveston. It is a small island off the Texas coast. These facilities, I have a map I'll share with you shortly. They're across the country. And again, they're not just manufactured, they're transported. So they're transported across the country in numerous trucks and trains, and they're lost along the whole way. And so nurdles have been around for a long time. Probably about the mid 70s or so, manufacturing across the country really exploded. And currently they're considered inert. They're not a problem to wildlife or humans, and we know that's not true. And this is a 1992 EPA report on the pellets. It talks about birds and turtles and fish and the impacts to all these animals if they're ingested. So you can see in that X-ray of the sea turtle, the red circle is showing you a nurdle inside. So it's not only a problem that wildlife is ingesting these plastics, they could potentially become caught in their esophagus, their digestive system. They also adsorb the chemicals that are in the environment, whether it's in the sand or the dirt or in a body of water. Chemicals adhere to these nurdles. So not only are wildlife ingesting plastic, which again comes from fossil fuel, they're also absorbing any chemicals that are attached to these nurdles. And you saw the images in the previous slide. It's not aesthetic to have them in the environment. And in the last 5 years or so, when we spoke in the beginning, Laurel mentioned about microplastics. We've been studying microplastics, small pieces of plastic that you see only through a microscope for 7 years around the island in sand and water samples. And when we started that, well, it's 8 years now, we started that in 2017. There wasn't anybody doing research on human health. And since 2020, the research on human health has just exploded. And I'm sure you've all seen articles that it's in every part of our body, it's in our blood, it's across the brain barrier. We had a conference that I helped plan, and Brittany, my coworker, and I both presented at Microplastics and Citizen Science. And there was a professor from Rutgers, and she is studying how plastics are passed from a mom to an offspring. And so Nurdle Patrol is a specific project. This image is Jace Tunnel. He's with the Heart Research Institute, Texas A&M in Galveston, and he's one of our long-term partners. So he began the Nurdle Patrol. He's the mastermind behind this process. And so it's a very simple process. It can be done anywhere in the world. And I'm going to show you some maps and a few more slides of different Nurdle Patrols that have happened. It's a super simple process. It's only 10 minutes of your time. And you can get on the website, nurdlepatrol.org. You can enter your location, the date you did it. If you took any images, you can share those. And in that 10 minutes, as you can see Jace demonstrating, you have a little glass container that you receive if you sign up for Nurdle Patrol, and you count how many pellets you collected in 10 minutes. It's a super simple process and really easy to get involved. So why is this important? Citizen science. This isn't scientists going out. We work with schools, we host corporate groups, it's individuals going out, it's organizations going out. So it's citizens out there looking at locations and reporting how many nurdles they find in 10 minutes. And this is important because the Nurdle Patrol demonstrates the amount of nurdles that are found at a specific location and could potentially even tie it back to a facility that manufactures these. So again, this is a published paper just based on Nurdle Patrol and the citizens that are out there collecting this data. And this is a map of the pre-production facilities, the nurdles, powders, and flakes across the country. North America makes about 17% of our primary plastics, the nurdles, the powders, and flakes, and we are the world's largest exporter of these products. In North America, we make about 130 to 154 billion pounds of plastic. And on this map, the red dots are known facilities that are manufacturing these pre-production plastics, and there's 141 of them. The lighter dots, the orange and the yellow, are facilities that are owned by pre-production plastic companies, but there's not enough public information available to actually determine if they are actively manufacturing nurdles. And so you can see the concentration is in the northeast, along the coast and the northern and eastern part of our country, and a large concentration along the Texas coast as well. And I want to focus in a little bit more. I do live in Galveston, and you can see Galveston and Houston on the map. You can see all the red dots, the concentration. Texas alone has 36 pre-production facilities, and most of them are unfortunately concentrated along the coast. We see a lot of nurdles on the western portion. It's covered right now, but Galveston Bay is underneath all those red circles. If you look down towards Victoria, you might have heard of Diane Wilson. She, for decades, fought the Formosa plant and went out and collected nurdles and documented them and saved them, and then sued Formosa and successfully won a $50 million settlement against this facility that's producing nurdles. Right now, they're supposed to have zero discharge, and they're really upgraded their facility. But again, these nurdles are so tiny, they're so lightweight, they're washed out in stormwater, and wastewater from these facilities. And so to this day, they continue to have, it's over $35 million in fines because they're not able to get to zero discharge. So unfortunately for the Gulf, we have these giant loop currents, all that warm water. Now, on this image, Florida is on the right side of the screen, and Texas is on the left side. If you look at the sea, right below sea, that is the Galveston Bay area. And so this warm water comes in from the Caribbean. It makes this giant loop close to Florida. Sometimes that loop that you see might reach up to Louisiana, and Louisiana is by the T and the boot of Louisiana, you can see it. Many times it just stays on the eastern portion, then goes around Florida and up the Atlantic coast. So there are pre-production facilities in Mexico. In addition, any other debris that might be brought into these loop currents might carry up the Atlantic coast, or it might end up staying in the Gulf. When we look closer to Texas on the western side of the Gulf, we can see these loops as well. And the loop currents in the Gulf go counterclockwise. So unfortunately for Texas, we have over 300 miles of Texas coast. We get more trash per mile of beach than any other coastal community. We average about 7 pounds for every mile of beach that we have. And there's a few reasons for this. On that map on the top, we have major rivers in Texas. They all flow from the northwest to the southeast. And this map is highlighting the Brazos River. You can see how large it is and how large a watershed. Where I live is the Trinity River. It's just directly to the right of the Brazos. That goes through Dallas and Houston. So about 16 to 18 million people have the potential to impact the health of the Trinity River. Any debris that enters into Galveston Bay and then out into the Gulf of Mexico. That image below the map is actually a bayou in Houston, and it shows you the amount of organic debris and obviously a lot of plastic debris that is collected and ends up again out in our bays and out in the Gulf of Mexico. Any type of plastic that's out in the environment that's not disposed of properly, it's going to break down into smaller and smaller pieces. And what makes that happen is the sun. I mentioned our microplastic project. We've been collecting sand and water samples around the island in 6 locations since 2017. And unfortunately, every sample has microplastics and microfibers. So we bring them back to our center. Our interns and our volunteers help to process them. And of course, and as you can see in that image, the microplastics that are produced, the sun helps to break them down. Animals often mistake them for food. And again, we're learning more and more that we are not just it's not just animals, but it's also humans that are ingesting or inhaling the microplastics that are found in the environment. And so this is a map that demonstrates all the different nurdle patrols that happen across the country. And you can see on the legend, if there's no nurdles were found in that 10 minutes, it's in a green. It goes up to over 1,000 in the purple dots. And you can see the concentration of nurdles is a lot on the different coasts around our country. But there is a facility, I want to draw your attention to Dallas. There is a facility that manufactures nurdles in Dallas. And there's a river and a lake up there that is loaded with nurdles, literally loaded. And we're working with partners to get volunteers out there to do nurdle patrols on a regular basis so that we can document it. We've seen images of the nurdles, and there's a lot of black nurdles in this particular area near Dallas. And the reason we think that they're there, it's not from the nurdle facility necessarily, but there is another facility, a GM facility where they make car parts. And so it could be the GM facility that is losing the nurdles during their manufacturing process. And so I wanted to focus on the Gulf. You can see all the different nurdle patrols. The eastern portion doesn't have as many over on the Florida coast. A lot of green, no nurdles found. And again, the concentration of red and purples in the Houston area. There are 3 pre-production facilities directly on Galveston Bay. And when we get a little bit closer, you can see the numbers, the purples, the concentration of purples as it goes up above the words Galveston Bay. It goes up into the Houston Ship Channel, and you can see the purple that goes all the way up underneath Houston as well. And then that long line is Galveston Island at the bottom. You can see all the orange and red dots where it says Galveston and Jamaica Beach. That is the island, and you can see the concentration of nurdles, 100 to 1,000 nurdles that are found every time we do a nurdle patrol. So how many people are involved in Nurdle Patrol? There's over 15,000 volunteers, and it's not just in the United States, it's across the world, closing in on 30,000 surveys at 11,000 sites, 531 partnering organizations, and I'm very proud to say that Turtle Island is one of the organizations. And there's also a special teacher's kit. So if you know a teacher or you are a teacher yourself and you're interested in it, we can arrange for you to receive a teacher kit. So if you decide to be part of a Nurdle Patrol, you get this really cool bag and a t-shirt and a little scarf and hat and everything to get you ready to go out. The box contains little glass jars that you can put your nurdles in. You get tweezers, a book to document everything, a link, all the information on how to do it, and of course, how to report the nurdles that you find. If you're interested in a teacher kit, you get a cool canvas bag, but you also get 6 jars of nurdles. And the nurdles are for you to use to demonstrate to your students what a nurdle is, to do research in your particular state and see if you have a pre-production facility, and then also to look for solutions. So whenever we have a school group, whether we're on the beach with them or they come to our center, we always talk to them about nurdles. We do nurdle patrols with every group, and we ask them what would be a solution. So this includes a curriculum, everything you need to do if you're a teacher. And it's really interesting to talk to students and hear what they think should happen. And we've had students do letter writing campaigns, whether it's to a local elected official or a state official, or specifically to a facility that we know is polluting. So how's TIRN doing? We started back in May of 2020. We've completed just over 2,700 patrols. We've collected just over 17,000 nurdles to date. And this is an image of part of our beach. It's Murdoch's is the facility that you see in the background. And this is a group of students that came to do a beach patrol with us. And so we pick a specific area of the beach. And if it's hard to see, but underneath their hands is the rack line, the WRACK line. It's the high tide line. And many times when the tide comes in, there'll be organic materials, but there'll also be pieces of plastic, macroplastics that we can see with our eyes. And then also this is where we see a concentration of nurdles. That particular facility is a gift shop and restaurant. And for some reason, in the dune systems at the far right of that image, you can't see the dunes, we find hundreds of nurdles there. And I think it's just the concentration and the tides that we have, and just that it has a good thick dune system back there that they get stuck as they get washed in with our tides. And so why do we do this? So this is one of our partners in the image. That is Neil. He's with the Surfrider Foundation. They're a big partner in our effort to get regulations. Currently at a state, for state of Texas, and also at a federal level, there are no regulations about nurdles. Again, they're considered inert. We're trying to get them classified as at least a number 2 waste so that there's some type of regulation. These facilities, as they're manufacturing, and many times they're lost during manufacturing, they're blown out of the facility. They can be blown out if there's a big storm, rainstorm, and they're washed out with the storm water. And many times as they're cleaning, they're also washed out with the wastewater. The discharge from these facilities normally goes directly into a river if they're near a river, or in our case, into bay systems. And so for the last 2 sessions in our state government in Texas, we meet every other year. So they met in 2025. They will not meet in 2026. So in 2023 and 2025, we worked with senators and representatives to have bills introduced in both our House and our Senate to have some type of regulation, and have worked with them to draft a bill that would be introduced to our House Natural Resource Committee. So this past session in 2025, it did make it to committee. We had a Senate and an accompanying House bill. There was a public hearing, and many of us went to the state capitol and testified. The hearing went past midnight. There were, of course, representatives from the industry and the Chemical Council in opposition of anything happening. And so unfortunately, it died in committee. It was never voted out. but we're not giving up. Working with Neil and Jace, who you'll see an image of towards the end of the presentation, we are working to send letters to our governor. We have the TCEQ, which is the Texas Council for Environmental Quality, and they are updating their surface water quality standards. These nurdles and powders or flakes are very lightweight. They float on the water. It's very difficult to get them out of the environment. And so we are asking our governor to instruct the TCEQ to add nurdles to their surface water quality standards. And so we've done this in multiple ways. We've worked with partners across the state. And in Galveston, I've recruited our park board who maintains our beaches and does our tourism, charter boat captains, fishing communities to sign on to a business letter. Also worked with our city council and our mayor and our city attorney and our city manager. And they wrote a resolution in support of this, and our city attorney sent it to our governor. And then the second letter that we're working on is for medical professionals, because we know more and more the impacts to human health from plastics and how plastics are entering our body. So we are hoping to get 100 medical professionals to sign on the letter. We're in the mid 80s, probably 85 to 87 medical professionals have signed on. With the business letter, when we felt like we had hit a point where we wanted to turn it into the governor, we asked the Coastal Conservation Association, it's the CCA, they're a large fishing organization, and they agreed to turn it in. So many times we are living in by Galveston Bay. It's a huge area for fish concentration, oysters, crabs, multiple species go through different points in their life. And of course, a lot of charter boat captains take our visitors out. Galveston Island has about 50,000 people as residents, but we get anywhere from 6 to 7 million visitors a year. And it's a large concentration of seafood restaurants on the island as well. So what's happening is we're raising awareness of the problem of fish eating these nurdles, these plastic products, and literally have images. I didn't include it in the presentation, but we have images of fish full of nurdles, their mouths full of it. And if you would fillet it, their body would be full of these nurdles. And so if you're eating seafood, you're not necessarily eating a nurdle, you're not eating the plastic they ingested, but any chemicals that adhere to it. And remember, it's fossil fuel, it's polymer. As it breaks down in their system, you could potentially be ingesting the chemicals. And so we're hoping with the businesses on board and the medical community on board, our governor will actually ask TCEQ to include these in the surface water quality standards, and that will be published in 2026. And so this is just to show you there is a Facebook page. If you want to check it out and learn more about nurdles, you can go to the nurdlepatrol.org page. You can also visit our site, seaturtles.org. We have a whole section on nurdles and the work we're doing in partnership with Jace on this project. And so why do we do this? We have over 300 miles of Texas coast. We have sea turtles, 3 different species of sea turtles that nest on our beaches. We're a major migratory flyway for birds. There's multiple species that use our beaches and our dune systems. And unfortunately, they're exposed to these nurdles on a regular basis. And so we do it to protect our natural resources. And we also do it to protect people in place and for future generations. And so I wanted to thank you for joining us tonight. I want to give full credit to Jace. Again, he's the brainchild behind Nurdle Patrol. He's down in the Corpus area with Heart Research Institute and A&M. This project is funded by Diane Wilson. All the money, if people think she has the $50 million settlement, she put it into a trust. So the Matagorda Bay Mitigation Trust funds this project so that we all can have the equipment we need to go out and do the Nurdle Patrols. And if you wanted to follow us, there's our Facebook information, our Instagram, and my email. So I appreciate you being here, and I will turn it back over to Laurel.
Thank you, Joanie. I feel like I even learned a ton, and we've been talking about nurdles lately, so that was a very informative webinar. Thank you.
You're welcome.
First, I guess I want to open it up to anybody that's in live in our webinar. If anybody has any questions, anything about nurdles in general, Turtle Island's work to combat nurdles, future legislation, anything like that. So feel free, don't hesitate to unmute yourself. If anybody has questions, and then we have some questions from social media that we sourced from followers too.
I've got one, Ken here. Um, Joni, is it possible to trace the nurdles back to their production? And if not, is that something that we should try to kind of force in there so that we have a better chance of making the manufacturers responsible for all these impacts?
Absolutely. That's a really good question. And so the reason Diane Wilson had such great success down in the Matagorda Bay system is she knew where out the discharge was coming from the facility. And so she was able to go to that specific location. It's very difficult to tie a nurdle back to a specific location. And so you have to be able to look at the surrounding areas around these facilities, where they discharge, where their wastewater, where their stormwater flows out, and then be able to tie it back to that specific facility. And that's why we're hoping, with the information we're sharing with the governor, what we're hoping they will tell them to do is that they need to do an audit on a regular basis. It should be daily, and check their stormwater areas, their wastewater facility areas, as they clean the facilities in the evening, they actually use, like when you think of a leaf blower, they go around at night and they try to vacuum up as much nurdles, powders, or flakes, whatever they're manufacturing. So there's no real way that handful of nurdles that you see on the screen, we don't know where they came from. They washed up on our beaches. There's 3 facilities on the bay. There's multiple other facilities. And with the currents again in the Gulf, they could have came into the Gulf from a facility in Mexico. So unless you're absolutely able to tie it back, we currently cannot connect a nurdle to a specific facility. And as I mentioned in the presentation, with the black nurdles being found in the Dallas area and that GM plant being up there, there is suspicion. There's no proof yet, but there is suspicion that it's being discharged from the GM facility and not the pre-production plastic facility.
Thank you. I'm wondering if it's possible to insist on some kind of chemical fingerprint in the manufacturing process. I could imagine all kinds of objections that it's expensive and so on and so forth. But if there's a way to chemically analyze the piece and then have that tell you where it was made, that might be an interesting idea. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure they would fight it. But the thing of it is, the Formosa plant that lost the $50 million settlement, if they're able to pay an additional, and I can't remember what year the settlement happened. I don't want to misspeak, but for several years now, they've been paying every time there's a discharge, they're fined, and they've paid an additional $35 million. And they're still in business and doing well and want to expand. So if they've paid $85 million, and they fight this every step of the way, they come. I mentioned briefly that, Brittany and I were able to participate in Citizen Science, the microplastic conference in Port Lavaca. There was an attorney, that not an employee of Formosa, but an attorney that is from the firm that represents Formosa at both days of the conference, taking notes the entire time. So they will fight it every step of the way. But I agree, Ken, we should do it. We need to find a way.
Hi,
Joanie,
Joni. It's really great to see you, and thank you so much for this very informative talk that you're giving on nurdles. I have heard of them. I knew about this, but you've definitely expanded my knowledge about what's going on, and Ken just asked all the questions that I had for you. So
Well, Donna, thank you. I'm glad you were able to join us tonight.
yeah, it seems like, when it comes to um, pollutions, I mean, and we still haven't been able to get uh, um, companies, corporations held responsible for plastic bottles and all that. So I mean, I think it's awesome work that you're doing, and I think I really appreciate that Turtle Island is uh, working in this area, but it just seems like it's going to be a long haul, and every effort that's made is just one step in the direction of like holding corporations responsible for their pollution.
Absolutely, 100%. And, Coke and others had made claims, promises that they would reduce their plastic production, with their products, going back to glass bottles and such, but they're not following up on it. But we can't stop. We all know the amount of plastic that's out in the ocean. We know the amount that's entering, if not on a daily basis, an annual basis. Um, and I think what's really going to turn the tide for this is the impacts to humans and the research that's being done. If you haven't had the opportunity to see plastic people, we did a showing here with our partners at Moody Gardens, Turtle Island, showed plastic people for the community. And then we also showed it at the microplastic conference in Port Lavaca. And it was one reporter following research, doctors around the world studying different ways plastic is harming humans. And, one of the last published papers recently, I think it was in March of this year, was it crossed the brain barrier. And the doctor that was in the movie, he thought that there was going to be a clot. And when he went to do the surgery on the individual, it was actually plastics, microplastics that were forming the clot in the brain.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Really
No, I
frightening.
haven't seen it, but I will definitely watch that.
Absolutely.
We have an anonymous question in the chat that I think kind of directly ties to plastic people in different ways that we can get the message out there. They say that they've been following multiple organizations' initiatives on pollution and environmental impacts, but don't feel optimistic about industry and government's efforts to combat this. Um, how can we increase understanding by the general public about how important this is? Um, I think Plastic People is a great launching point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know where you live, but every person that we touch with our work in the Gulf, we talk to them when we do our outreach and education programs. There's always a component about plastics and the impacts of plastic and how people can make personal choices and reduce their personal consumption, finding products that are reusable. And also, we have to have hope. We have to work. I work at the local and state and federal level. And at the local level, we've had a lot of success. We, as I said, had a resolution, and it was a multi-step process to get it on the agenda. I had to do city council workshops. I had to meet with the city attorney and the mayor and our city manager. But they passed a resolution and said, this is a problem for our community. We are a coastal island, and we are seeing these nurdles on our beaches, and it's a problem for us. So you have to be involved locally. You have to have your voice, support a conservation, ocean conservation organization. I appreciate that you're here supporting us. You personally can spread the word, share it with your friends and your family, help them to become aware and to become members, join an ocean conservation organization like Turtle Island, support our work, but your voice matters. Reach out to your city council, talk to your state and your federal elected officials. When I do mainly adult presentations, I remind people we elected them. They work for us, so they need to listen to us. So don't hesitate to call. People are really hesitant to pick up the phone and call an elected official. They work for us. And if they don't call, I show up and I call them out in meetings. They'll say, oh, we don't need to have public comments on an item that's not on the agenda. And I'm like, yes, we do, because I email you and you don't respond. So how do I know you even care about what I'm saying? So have a voice. Your voice matters.
I think there's another great question here from Dennis. They seem to do beach cleanups and find bottle caps, but haven't seen nurdles. Other than the high tide line, do you have any tips on where you can find nurdles specifically? And obviously looking at your maps of facilities and all of that too?
Yeah. Where did he say where he lives?
No.
So anywhere, again, if you're on a beach, I would look in the rack line, the tide line. I would look in the dunes or in the dune plants. Um, Really, we've seen them in all areas of the beach, in the active water line, in the rack line, and caught in the sand up against the dunes. We have a seawall as well on part of our area, and that's another reason underneath that complex, the Murdoch's complex that I had an image of. They get caught underneath there because it's a dune. There's a structure with pylons and then it's also the seawall. So just anywhere where they can get trapped. And once you see them, many times people will pick up little pieces of shell or little pieces of plastic. But once you actually start spotting a nurdle, we've had people that come back. We had a group, I just saw them recently. They come every year, they bring their staff, and they just tell us, like, now they can't walk on the beach and not see nurdles.
Joni, if there aren't any other questions from our group that's live here, right, please raise your hand or unmute yourself. Just go ahead and then we'll move on to some questions from our social media followers. Yes, Danielle. Danielle, go ahead. You just have to unmute yourself.
Can you unmute her, Laurel?
She is unmuted on my end. By the way, Dennis, who submitted our question about picking up bottle caps, is in Galveston, east of Murdoch's.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, we're going to
Danielle,
have a winter art project with trash found from the beach with our winter Texans next month.
yeah, we'll have a registration link for that coming soon on our event calendar. Um, Danielle, type in the chat if you can hear us and you're trying to get your question across, and I can read it aloud for you. But in the time being, Joni, a question that came up quite a lot during social media followers and asking them what questions they had about nurdles was, is there any type of technology that can help mitigate with nurdle spills, or is this a completely new animal essentially because they do float and they do absorb different toxins in the environment?
You mean to stop them at the production site? Is that what you're referring to, you think?
Yeah.
So at the production site, I've mentioned Formosa in the Port Lavaca area several times. I don't know all the technology that's involved. There are engineers involved, and one of them was at our conference. So basically, if you have a wastewater area, maybe a drain in your facility, they have multiple steps. They've spent literally millions of dollars adding additional steps to basically filter it out. If you think of like scooping a net out of your swimming pool, there's multiple steps, and it's obviously very small, especially if they do powders or flakes. And so there is technology at the facility to reduce it, but you can never completely eliminate the discharge. And then, of course, in the image where there was a spill on the tracks or out at the open ocean, you can clean it up as best as possible. In facilities that have been polluting for a long time, it actually gets down into the soil because, it's on normally a body of water. If it's on a bay or a river, it'll get down into the vegetation, and they literally have to remove the vegetation and the plants and the soil to get the nurdles out because they're so highly concentrated. So it just depends on the area. There isn't any special type of vacuum. I mean, obviously, when it's spilled out in the sea, it ends up on beaches. There's been small islands that have been covered in nurdles from discharge from a large crate from a vessel that's been lost at sea. But there is some existing technology to use at the site of production. It's very expensive and it's not currently required.
So that kind of jumps off into another common question is how do you even, it seems that these spills can happen either in discharge or they can happen in transport. Is there a way to, whether through legislation or working with the companies that transport them, how does enforcement work for something like that?
There unfortunately isn't enforcement. There's no federal laws currently, and that's why we're working really hard in Texas with 36 of the 141 active facilities, trying to get them to have some type of regulation. So there was a train that derailed on the southeast side of Houston. And, people responded, organizations responded. They heard about it. They heard that there was a nurdle spill. They had images. They sent them to TCEQ. I don't even know if TCEQ came out. I honestly don't know if they ever did show up, but there was no restoration. There was no cleaning of the site.
Wow. Um, Seems like one of the biggest things, other than joining Nurdle Patrol on an individual level, would be supporting eventual legislation on the matter. Is there a way for people to, or will there be a way to, for people to voice their support in it being included in the surface water quality standards?
Yeah, absolutely. They'll have public meetings, and so please continue to follow us. That we've one of many of our partners are based in Austin, where our state government is located, and so they follow it very closely, and they're in conversations with different representatives and senators, and of course our governor. And so we will keep our members updated as the public comment periods come up. Hopefully we will have a large group be able to actually travel to Austin. We have been meeting with different staff members of TCEQ as we go through this process as well. But as soon as it's open to the public, we will definitely notify our members.
Okay, wonderful. Danielle, I feel horrible. I'm seeing that you're unmuted. Um, I'm not sure if it's on your end or if you want to pop your question in the chat so we can get it answered.
Sorry.
Oh, there
Can
you
you hear
are.
me?
Yes.
Yeah, it turned out that I didn't have the settings set up in my phone and then it wouldn't let me unmute myself.
Oh,
So,
it
and
happens.
then I got and then I had to go there and then it kicked me off the call. So, yeah.
Oh, no.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having this webinar and learning about the initiatives. And I heard you were talking about how you can get involved locally and, at the statewide and the federal level, depending on, your situation. I'm currently living abroad and I'm curious because I know that plastics, microplastics, nurdles is not just something um, that is unique to the United States. And I'm curious, like, if there are other sort of research or initiatives that you're aware of that are going on globally, particularly in areas that may have more plastics product or refineries and production, and also because wildlife doesn't just stay in one geographic area. It moves around in the ocean and so does all the pollution. So I'm kind of curious sort of what this is looking at on a more bigger, scope, and if there's the same similar kind of challenges globally.
Yeah, absolutely. So there are global efforts to reduce plastic. There are global efforts to pass a plastic treaty. Of course, the United States doesn't participate actively in it, but other countries are. And so they're working to look at, again, this ties back into fossil fuel and the extraction and the process, the locations where the extraction happens. And the location of these facilities. Many times it's in low income communities, communities of color, fence line and front line communities. Indigenous groups are fighting it. So there is, Danielle, a global effort and a global effort to pass a plastic treaty. I don't know if that answers your question completely, but I have a partner. We work with some of the indigenous communities, the Native American original people in Texas, and one of them is the Society of Native Nations. And Frankie is very active at the global level and travels literally around the world in trying to help pass treaties that will reduce the consumption of plastic and the extraction process.
Yeah, that helps answer. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for being here.
Do we have any other questions? Questions on questions? I think that pretty much covers it for what our followers on social were asking about. Joni, I think this might be a clear answer for most of us here, especially since we all love the planet. We're in the midst of advocating for the Endangered Species Act this week. I'm sure everybody's seen our emails that's on this call and our action alerts and all of that. How do you see something like stopping pollution and nurdle production at the source helping our endangered species and critical habitats?
Oh, absolutely. And so I mentioned, we have 3 species of turtles that nest on our beach. Our state sea turtle, the Kemp's Ridley, is primarily nests in Mexico and Texas, the western portion of the Gulf. We had a record-breaking year, over 400 nests this past nesting season in Texas. And so we are seeing an increase. Unfortunately for turtles, the only way we can truly understand the population is to look at the number of nesting turtles. And so when we see this increase in Texas in the number of nests, we feel we can celebrate. There's still so many challenges facing endangered species, but it's a reason to celebrate because our work, our starting and focusing on the sea turtle hotline for the Texas coast, working for years on the nest patrol, it's paying off. But going back to that image, we know that turtles are also ingesting plastic. There was that one image with the X-ray with the turtle having the nurdle inside it. And so whether it's a bird species, we have multiple species of birds. Black rails are found on the island. Plovers are found on the island. They nest on our beaches, and we know that they are ingesting these plastic parts, pieces. We know that they are feeding the plastic to their offspring. So, the protection with the Endangered Species Act offers has been successful. It's bipartisan. It's supported by the large majority of American citizens. And so it's something we need to keep in place. We don't need to weaken it. We need to make sure that we protect the habitat for these species, and that if a species is considered threatened, one that comes to mind is the monarch butterfly. It's currently being considered for being listed under the Endangered Species Act. So if they weaken it, it would lose the protection of habitat. It would lose, the protection of looking at what's impacting it in its habitat. Many times when we are looking at a facility or a fossil fuel facility, we are involved as an organization in litigation. In the Endangered Species Act, the specific sections 4 and 7, which they're trying to weaken, are what we use, what our attorneys that represent us use to help protect these species and their habitat. So yes, please, please, please submit comments. They're due on Monday, the 22nd, and working with multiple other organizations. We have a very high goal, but I think we can make it at getting 1 million people to submit comments in support of the act.
Wonderful. And we have 4 separate action alerts, but they're all linked within a blog right on our homepage that you'll see, but it's seaturtles.org/defend the ESA. Please take all 4 actions. They're 4 extremely dangerous proposed rollbacks. And everything is deeply interconnected because we have this extremely successful bipartisan legendary law in place. We need to uphold it because obviously there's other, as we've heard tonight, loud and clear, there's other roadblocks for other environmental consequences that humans are creating for the environment right now. So we got to keep the Endangered Species Act intact. If anybody has questions on how to submit comments, please reach out to Joanie or myself. We're happy to walk you through it. It can seem like a daunting process, but we've made it as simple as possible for you. Just plug away and pour your heart out on the comment, and it'll be great.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Laura. I
No,
didn't
go
mean to
ahead,
interrupt
Joanie.
you, but I wanted to add that many times when I talk to groups and individuals and tell them, that their voice matters, it doesn't matter if you understand every part of the Endangered Species Act. You don't need to go read it and review it. You just need to talk about a place you enjoy going, an animal you've loved to see, everything from our brown pelicans to our sea turtles to our bald eagles. They were on the verge of extinction. We almost lost the Kemp's Ridley in the mid 80s. There was only 360 nests the entire nesting season in Texas and Mexico. And that was a species that was on the verge of extinction. So it doesn't matter that you understand the act completely. What matters, it was what's important to you. If you find peace in the environment, if you have a special place you go, you have a specific species that you're aware of, an animal that has been saved because of the act, express that. And that's what makes a difference, that you personalize it. You tell why it's important to you.
Well put. Well, I think maybe that wraps it up for the evening. It's pretty perfect timing. If there aren't any other final questions from everybody that's here, we will be sending out a message and in your membership portal as well. Everybody can access this video again. And in 2 weeks, if you want to share it with your network that is not in the Turtle Island Restoration Network membership program, then it'll be live for the public then as well. But thank you everybody for showing up and asking really thoughtful questions, and wanting to get involved on a deeper level. It's really heartwarming and critical for us to see when we're constantly fighting for this stuff. So thank